Good morning and namaste from Hamilton, Canada. Welcome you all. And this morning was a very interesting morning. It is here 9th May, supposed to be a brilliant spring, but then there was a snowfall. So somebody called this season as sprinter, a mixture of spring and winter. It was actually quite delightful to watch a tree with white flowers outside my home, and these big snowflakes were settling on those white blossoms. White and white, flowers and flakes. But now it is clearing out, and I can see just now, as I'm talking to you outside my window, the sky is blue and the brilliant sun came again, filled the space with the light. My name is Jivasu, and I'm going to explore with you, of course, in a very condensed form, about Sri Aurobindo. When after my MD medical education, I entered in Shivananda Ashram, Rishikesh, and I read one of his books, and that inspired me right away. And I followed his teaching after that. Sri Aurobindo, along with Swami Vivekananda, were the two great teachers, yogis, rishis, who rejuvenated the profound Indian teachings, the Hindu teachings. Swami Vivekananda was an extrovert, very dynamic action in external world. But Sri Aurobindo was contemplative. After he retired into his tiny place in Pondicherry, he hardly ever came out. But within the cell of his contemplation, he created marvelous works about Indian teachings and philosophy. He was a yogi. He was an intellectual giant. He was a philosopher. He was a sage. He was a revolutionary. And along with his spiritual companion mother, he established Auroville in Pondicherry. The essence of his teachings was of synthesis of yoga, integral yoga, Purna yoga. He said, yoga is not about particular technique, particular method. Our whole life is yoga. And what he meant by yoga was unfolding of the power of consciousness. He called consciousness force. That consciousness force is embedded in us, and our body and rest of the world and nature is basically a laboratory in which experiment has to be performed so that that consciousness force will express itself into our works in the world. For him, the world, the nature, the body were all the part of it. He was never a world denier. To him, the world and nature and the body were as real as any divine force could be, because all this is the manifestation of the single consciousness force. integral yoga, synthesis of yoga. But his master statement, which is very relevant to us in these times when we are facing crises, and the statement was, man is a transitional being. That we are still in the process of ripening and maturation. We all human being, the whole humanity. Because his vision, his teachings were based on evolution. But this was not the evolution about which Darwin talked. His evolution was the evolution of awareness, more and more manifestation of that integral consciousness into the world. So he said, man is a transitional being. Our past was of animal. Our present is the cusp between animal and divine, what we call human, but is not truly human. That is why, if you look at the world, we don't live in particularly a very beautiful world. There's so much anxiety, so much fear, so much conflict, so much chaos, so much desire to overpower each other, dominate the poverty and all the problems. Because this is the phase of transition. If you look at the animal world, they are very well settled in their nature because nature takes care of them. But we came out of their animal past. So we are no more in our settled ways, in repose, or live with the rhythms of nature. We are in utter confusion and chaos. And there is a reason for it. Because anything beautiful, anything worthwhile of great value, it only comes out of chaos. Because chaos contains the most marvelous patterns of future. It always happens, there is a pattern, familiar, stagnant, and that pattern is shattered. What we will expect? We will expect a chaos, a confusion. And we are in that transition, and we are moving to that future, which is divine. And divine doesn't mean about God, about temple, about religions, about ideology, about philosophies and rituals. It is about manifestation and expression of consciousness force, that consciousness and energy. That is what evolution is all about. And the evolution is never smooth, because if something old is breaking down and new is going to replace it, it is not going to be an easy process. It will have catastrophe. It will have turbulence and turmoil. It will have pain and sorrow. If you really look into our own life, do you think we can ever transform by living a very smooth, comfortable, protected life? If you look into the life of any sage, any rishi, any yogi, anyone who was transformed, you will find one feature, that there was an element of suffering. Because old has to disappear, to be broken, to vanish, and something new has to happen. It's not a linear or smooth process. Even if you plant a seed in the earth, seed has to break its shell. It is an explosion, and out of that comes a new plant which grows, That is the whole nature of evolution. So this current crisis collectively, which we are facing, the corona pandemic, we can look it from many angles, but Sri Aurobindo's angle will be that collectively we were at a particular stage. We are stuck at a particular level. And when such crisis comes, which I mentioned, can come individually, transform, and that is how this whole crisis is indicating that we have to change, we have to transform. Of course, this collective crisis is suffering, death, pain, sorrow, fear, is frightening, but nonetheless, it contains in it the seed of evolution. All suffering, all sorrows, all pain, they are the indicators, they are the initiator of the evolution. But that evolution can only happen if we become aware. Because in front of these crises, we may regress rather than progress. In fact, we can go to the back stages, to those animal stages, just living for survival, cocooning ourselves, locking ourselves. That is not the way. Idea is such a shattering event is telling us to look within, to look for the next stage of development, growth, and evolution. And that is not only technological, that is not only scientific. Of course, that has to happen because it has to go together. But the main core of this evolution is reaching a new level of consciousness, to discover our potential, and our potential is that consciousness energy, because that only will solve our existential crises. No matter how much science we develop, how much technology we have, how much artificially intelligence we gather, we can never solve the fundamental problems of life. And those fundamental problems of life are problem of fear, problem of jealousy, problem of meaning, problem of purpose, problem of love, who I am, where I'm going, from where I came. All those fundamental questions can only be answered through that evolution. That evolution is of consciousness force. So this is the time to contemplate about it. And that was the essence of the message of Sri Aurobindo. Man is a transitional being. And we will face these catastrophics, this chaos, but it must stimulate us to look within, beside strengthening our material world, scientific world, technological world. But quite often, people, they depend only on external world, and that will be only half of the work done. As we saw, the most mighty countries, the most mighty technology and science, they failed because there is so much unknown in the nature. We don't know how many viruses are hidden, what nature has in its store for us. So while doing the science and technology, we have to follow another evolution. This is not the end of the earth, and there won't be any. A lot of people talk about sixth extinction. They are right, but they are only right because for them the peak of human achievement is intellect and science. But Sri Aurobindo said, no, intellect and science is merely one milestone. So we must have a very clear hope, but that hope must be based on the facts of our being, that we are not only the material body, we are the consciousness itself which pervades the whole cosmos, which created this whole universe. And we have to tap into it. And that is what our future is. The sixth extinction is not about the extinction of the world. It is the sixth extinction about the extinction of ignorance. We are indeed divine. We are indeed consciousness. We are indeed Satchit Anand. The bliss, the awareness, and the existence. And that is what we have to discover. And in this time, when we are locked, we can go within. And we have to discover that. Because that is our destiny. And we cannot ignore it. If we ignore it, we will suffer. No matter what we achieve in external world. That was the message of Sri Aurobindo's teaching, so relevant. A master, a giant, a yogi. Thank you very much for joining me. And if you have any question, you can write and I will respond to it. Thanks again. Namaste.